And we're live. Hello, everybody.
Nice.
Hey there.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
I have
Freaking,
crippling
why isn't
depression.
this thing working? That's fine. Okay.
Just kidding.
Yeah, so we're streaming now. Yay! Sorry for the lack of a stream
Alright.
on Tuesday. I was putting everything I had into editing the video that launched on, was it yesterday or
Yeah, it was yesterday.
freaking yeah, that took a really long time. So anyways, yeah, we're here now and we've got some I don't know, how would you describe it?
A collection of news stories, like always.
I know, but what kinds of news stories?
Juicy news stories.
Juicy?
Yeah. I mean, the first story what we're going to talk about. I mean, yeah, just casually on Google, just there, and it's important. And
Alright.
should I say what it is?
Oh, by all
Who wants
means,
to-
introduce it.
Apparently, police have been casually colluding with a far right extremist, quote unquote.
The Proud
And,
Boys, specifically. So, whatever you make of that.
Yeah.
So basically, what's been going on is that several text messages between one of the leaders of the Proud Boys and I believe the chief of the Rapid Response Unit of Oregon Police Department have been caught exchanging some very friendly text messages between each other. And of course, the two clearly have a very strong rapport. Now, that in and of itself is very suspicious. I mean, one could argue that it's actually not really much of a problem, but when you have text messages explaining that it's not like that, there's no reason to execute an arrest on an arrest warrant.
Well, no, I mean, like, in those text messages, the organizer of the Proud Boys is directly instructing the officer, giving him tips how to do his job, like who to go after.
And you can also
What to
find
do.
one of the text messages that's going to show up frequently in that article. Well, not that article. In the article, is that the police chief, police officer, police. What would be the term? What would the term be?
Well, he was
I
their chief of police, so.
It was the chief of police of the Rapid
he was
Response Unit
important.
specifically.
Or their captain, whatever. I'm fucking too tired right now.
Well, I can't think right now. It takes a few minutes for my brain to boot up. But anyways, the police captain
I
has
just don't
said
care.
that.
Right?
So the police captain has told him it's just like, we have no reason to execute on some warrant, and giving even him tips for how to avoid arrest. Mostly, like, what happened is that the leader of the Proud Boys has an
He's
assistant.
he's a police lieutenant. I just pulled up the article now.
Excellent. So the lieutenant, or rather the leader of the Proud Boys, has an assistant who might be getting in trouble with police because he brawls with Antifa a lot.
Okay, well the point is that this confirms essentially this isn't something which I've really mentioned before because I had considered I'd done what I should have never done, but I keep doing in these sort of situations, which is I give these people these groups or these actors involved in highly charged situations like this the benefit of the doubt. We already know that Antifa, like we have it documented that there are politicians, mayors, and police departments which simply won't do anything when Antifa is rioting. And on top of that, you have an interesting story, which was on the Corbett report, that there are police officers working within Antifa, and there are also police officers posing as Antifa, and then there are Antifa in Germany, and I think there was one recently in Canada where they're being bussed around to certain events, like Black Bloc organizers are being bussed around in government vehicles. So we've known that they were doing this at least with Antifa, but I figured, hey, well, there's no evidence that Patriot Prayer, Proud Boys, or whatever the fuck that one was in Charlottesville are being organized by the state. Well, now we have proof that they're being organized by the state too. So that's what's happening right now. These two groups are set up by the state, and they're having these events are little proxy battles designed to get our attention.
Make no mistake, like the alt-right, Antifa, they don't even represent 0.1% of what people actually believe. They're nobody.
Yeah.
They're nothing. Their ideas make no sense, and I think even the most brain-addled of government-indoctrinated idiots in this country understand that.
Well, I don't think, you're fully, well, I think you may be comprehending this, but what's happening right now, this political climate, at least the normalization of violence, that's being manufactured by the state. We have proof of that now, hard proof. Because both sides, the so-called far-right demonstrators and Antifa, are being organized and are being constructed by the state, and the media is picking up on this, which is also controlled by the state, and they are turning around and saying, oh, look at how violent political culture is. We just need to come back to the political system. We need to come together, and we need just what do they say about it again?
Just vote.
Why are we so divided? That's it.
Why are we so divided?
Well, why are we so divided? Well, the state keeps trying to divide us.
Every time people start to realize, like, hey, you know what, we actually have a lot of crap in common, suddenly some new riot breaks out.
And I think it's very convenient that right about the time when everyone starts becoming disenfranchised with the political system, Antifa all of a sudden becomes incredibly prevalent, and so do their so-called alt-right counterparts. And also, isn't it very interesting how I'm just, now that I've seen this, there's a lot of stuff that I noticed before that now has new context. Like, have you noticed how, despite having completely different ideologies, philosophical backgrounds, and approaches to what they're doing, the Proud Boys and Antifa, well, like, don't get me wrong, they're both authoritarian collectivist groups, but Antifa was trying to act based on propaganda of the deed. So they, if we were to take them at face value, everything that they did, they would be attacking symbols of capitalism and the state. But these so-called alt-right groups, they're attacking, they're attacking symbols of progressivism or whatever. Well, I mean, they're both carrying out, like, they're both attacking each other, though, and they're both carrying out their rioting in the exact same fashion. Like Antifa, they all use blunt objects. Like, isn't it just very strange how it never actually, like, despite how much these groups absolutely fucking hate each other and how much they hate the system, there've never been any, like, bombs or shootings that have gone off during one of these riots. It's always cheap shit like poles and firecrackers and stuff. Now it looks very controlled. Like the way that it now with this, it seems like it's just being controlled, like enough to outrage people, but not enough to like spark a civil war, basically.
Yeah.
This reminds me of something. You remember when Steven Crowder made a big deal about infiltrating Antifa?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember that.
Well, you remember what he supposedly found in Antifa? People talking about how they're stockpiling weapons, like AK-47s, shotguns, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I remember that.
Where are they?
I don't know.
I mean, like, this is...
They don't-
I can't imagine that Steven Crowder single-handedly took down Antifa's arsenal of weapons that they've been stockpiling over several months or several
Well,
years.
to be fair, they could have just been full of shit.
That's where I'm getting at. I think that that whole thing might have just been a setup for the sole purpose of getting people scared of Antifa, even
But
though
that's the other thing. Yeah, you see pictures of these people from these groups carrying guns all the time. Like in the media, you see those guys wearing those red communist hammer and sickle bandanas, carrying AR-15s, or they have a pistol inside of one of those plastic grips to make it look like an assault rifle. But yeah, when the actual rioting happens, you never see any guns. There's never anybody with any guns there.
I think that the whole sole purpose of having Antifa with weapons is to be caught. The only reason that they quote unquote
To scare
stockpiled the AK-47s and the shotguns is to be caught by Steven Crowder for talking about it.
Yeah, it's basically both of these groups are propaganda constructs. I mean, let's just call it right here for what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really know what more there is to add on to it other than recalling past things that we've noticed about them, but that's just going to take some time to think about it because there's a lot of stuff to go over there. But yeah, we'll be definitely digging around because I don't know. This sounds like a good topic for a video to me. I don't know about you guys.
Oh no, it is.
We'll have to like really dig around because so much stuff has happened. So many things have been said by people who consider themselves leaders that are really that really have their context completely changed. I mean, I'm going to go so far as to say that Richard Spencer is, well, evil. Not just in the sense that he's a fascist, but in the sense that I think that someone who unironically follows the religion of statism, like actually, consciously is aware that statism is a religion but worships it anyway. I think he is going full on. I think he's completely and consciously working with the state to do this.
Oh yeah,
he's probably like a CIA asset.
Have you noticed how basically nobody actually likes Richard Spencer, even actual alt-right fascist ethno-nationalists, whatever group, even they don't like Richard Spencer. The only people who seem to be following Richard Spencer around are the media, essentially. Now, isn't it strange how somebody who, you know, the way Spencer looks at things is, yeah, the entire media, I mean, to an extent, he's kind of right. Like, the media does pick political targets, but he's definitely not one of them because he's gotten so much coverage from them. And he just willingly goes to them and gives them all this footage, like that "Hail Trump, Hail Our Leader" video. Like, I am 100% convinced that he's a state actor. Like, especially for somebody who thinks that Jews have so much influence in the media. Like, if we were looking at things from the way he looks at things, I mean, if there was a Jew in the media who wanted his dick sucked, then Spencer's on his knees. Like, that seems very counterproductive to the messages which he is preaching.
Well, he's got a problem with the Jews in the media, but he seems to have no problem with the Jews who not only currently control the government, but will control any government that he attempts to create. That's just inevitable.
Everything he does, though, the media is always there, and they're always demonizing him and anyone else who Antifa and the media claim to be under that alt-right umbrella, which is basically anybody who's not in the political system, because you'll take note that like a lot of people try to say that it's just a Democrat or so-called left-wing bias in the media, but no, you'll notice that they cozy up to certain Republicans and people who fancy themselves as being on the political right, so to speak, as well, and so it's not just a left-wing bias. It's a whoever works in the state's interest bias.
Yeah.
Well, that completely explains why it is that John McCain could basically get on mainstream media like on a daily basis up until he died.
Yeah.
Anybody remember
Now,
that?
now, I'm not suggesting that Trump is working against the state's interest. You have to remember that he is the president of the United States, and currently the CIA controls the media, and he has direct control of the CIA. So, kind of gets your noggin jogging. No, that's definitely done as a propaganda effort, as a form of misdirection to try and make people think that Trump is anti-establishment, countercultural, to try and lure people back into the political system as well.
This is probably the reason for the existence of quote-unquote political outsiders at all. I mean, how many people who would consider themselves progressives, liberals, generally on the quote-unquote left, were brought back into the political system because of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez?
Well, they never really left that countercultural phase. I mean, they were still supporting Bernie Sanders when they were still supporting communism. So
yeah,
they just
fair
found
enough. I'm just like, how many of them didn't even want to vote for the
I mean,
Democrat anymore?
they still believe in the political system, and they still believe in the mythologies of the state. It's completely unsurprising that someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who uses all the lingo and gets the Republicans and so-called right wing all worked up, would gather the attention of these so-called disenfranchised people and get them back into the mainstream partyarchy, because they never really left. And yeah, it really is just lingo, because like since Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been in the House, she hasn't really like gone through on any of the more, like, aside from the Green New Deal, she's started to walk back on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say, like, Trump being anti-establishment. It's funny because throughout his presidency so far, he hasn't built the wall. He banned bump stocks. There are
yeah,
countries
how the fuck is he any? How the fuck he's just like a worse Obama, just using their reasoning. He's like a worse Obama. He's killed more people in just the last 2 years in drone strikes than Bush did in his entire presidency and at least half of Obama's presidency. He has increased the amount of regulations on the economy by several thousand, and despite claiming every day it's like 200 new federal regulations, despite claiming that there are none being put on. Like, he's apparently the president of deregulation. Like, what the fuck even?
Well,
And
remember,
yeah, he had like this very minor tax cut, like couple percent, but he's increasing spending so much that it doesn't even really matter. It's
Well,
just
remember-
it's just implied taxation in the future.
well, remember one of the goals of the quote-unquote tax cut was for it to be revenue neutral. Now, it goes without saying that if you're following the Laffer curve, then any tax cut from the current percentage down to 10% can only result in increased revenue. But because that's not being taken into account, revenue neutrality means that you have, in exchange for every $1 in tax cuts, you have to increase taxes somewhere else.
Right.
The only thing it really did was cut income taxes a tiny amount for a certain number of amount of people, but in exchange, like, certain caps on deductions were reduced. So they basically just shuffled the deck chairs on the Titanic, and I do mean the Titanic, because
Well,
guess
yeah,
what's
that-
sinking?
That on top of the spending, which has been going on, the insane amount of spending, which is going to have to result in future taxation.
Here's something that I was thinking about, because I heard people on the radio on my way to school this week talking about how Trump is doing tax cuts on the rich while everyone else is just getting fucked over. But at the same time, I'm thinking, hey, what about those tariffs that I've been hearing about in the news? I don't know, but could there possibly some sort of correlation with that?
It's interesting how Democrats in general, progressives, the liberal media in general, don't ever harken on about tariffs. I mean, it would be absolutely hypocritical for them to say that they're free traders, but still, if they wanted to make Trump look bad, all they'd have to do is go up to farmers and get interview after interview after interview about how increasing the cost of steel has made their lives worse.
It's because they advocate for tariffs too.
Pretty much.
Which, by the way, that's another hilarious contradiction which I've noticed with progressive economics and government policy in general. That increasing taxation can disincentivize spending in certain industries, but increasing the cost of production through other regulations or taxes can also increase spending and activity in that market. Like for example, the minimum wage debate versus carbon taxes. Same exact proposal, but they're claiming two different things will happen.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
What two different things are they claiming?
Well, they're claiming that carbon taxes will disincentivize spending on vehicles because people won't be able to afford it, but they're also claiming that raising the minimum wage will increase employment and give people more money because potatoes.
Oh, what's even funnier is I'm pretty sure you've heard some of the economic arguments for cap and trade back when that was being debated around 2013, 2014.
Yeah, that's even funnier.
The way it was supposed to work, for those of you unfamiliar with it, is that you as an industry would be able to produce a certain amount of goods and services, and then you would have to buy the privilege from the federal government to be able to produce more. Now, I say production because their propaganda is going to say, like, emissions, but emissions are a byproduct of production and are literally, like, one-to-one correlated, so I'm going to say production. So you buy the privilege from the federal government to be able to produce more. And you can then trade this privilege, this worthless piece of paper, in between other industries. And the idea is to create a whole new industry where people are going to trade and exchange and buy and sell the privilege from the federal government to be able to produce more goods and services.
Well, no, it's pretty obvious that's just going to create artificial scarcity. And a lot like patenting, it's also going to be used for political expedience based on which company has the closest ties to the state and does more for the state.
I mean, at this point, like, cap and trade is literally going to give the federal government the ability to dictate how much a company can produce. Can you really say that they don't have dominion over that company at that point? That they can say, oh, you're only allowed to produce X amount of goods this month. It's absolutely totalitarian. And I remember seeing ads on TV about how capping emissions is going to somehow improve the economy because, trade is going to take place, even though, as you said, artificial scarcity.
Well, I mean, at the point where they're directing companies and they're directing what they can and can't produce and how much or how little. I mean, at that point, it would be very hard to differentiate between what we have currently and a centrally planned economy.
Well, that's the direction that every state, I think, inevitably moves towards.
Well, the difference at that point is just that entrepreneurial speculation exists, but they're gonna come after that pretty soon, after cap and trade and all these other regulations. So
I think the last of the Fohegans, Elizabeth Warren, has proposed a wealth tax, so they're already starting to go after that.
Oh boy.
I mean, that'll be tremendously fun.
Yeah.
Large reason that you have propaganda like that. What was the propaganda piece that Warren Buffett pays less, has a lesser tax rate than his secretary?
Yeah, that was pretty much it.
That was the propaganda there is that, oh no, look how unfair it is. But in reality, like, the secretary pays income taxes, Warren Buffett pays capital gains taxes. They're going to be different. That's just how it works.
Speaking of, so I guess we'll just move on to the next topic. But speaking of these regulations, which will increase the cost of production, particularly minimum wage. So in New York City, they have a $15 minimum wage now. There are some cities which have a $15 minimum wage. And the New York Times created a hilarious but also absolutely fucking infuriating propaganda piece titled, I'm just going to read the title for you. After winning a $15 minimum wage, fast food workers now battle unfair firings. Gee, all those two events might be connected.
No, that's not possible. I mean,
yeah, they're just not going to admit they're wrong, are they? Never going to admit they're wrong.
So, didn't you see my $1 million minimum wage video? I mean, if you give people $15 billion an hour in minimum wage, they're just going to spend that money back into the economy. So this can only help people, right? That people are never fired because their wages increase.
But there's no proof that
that's why this propaganda piece just absolutely fucking pisses me off. Is that they have to know at this point, because right as it started happening, now they're saying, oh, they had absolutely no sense of self-awareness. They're just saying, oh, well, did we do that? No, we didn't do that. It had to have just been greedy business owners, because there could literally be no other reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
other reason, even though they're disincentivized from doing that without the artificial costs.
Yeah, this actually makes me sad. You see, when I turned 21, my dad took me out to New York City to celebrate the day I turned legal drinking age, just to see, try to figure out, what kind of alcohol I would be able to enjoy, which, spoiler alert, was none of it, but, I mean, it was still a fantastic experience. I went to a wonderful steak restaurant, just had a fantastic filet mignon. It was an amazing thing.
That sounds fun.
It was absolutely fantastic, and with a $15 minimum wage, I'm actually not sure if anyone's going to be able to do that ever again. I mean, I remember in Seattle, when they got a $15 minimum wage, their restaurant industry just absolutely cratered. I don't think there's going to be steak restaurants in New York City, at least not as many as there were.
Yeah.
So
In
this
Seattle, it costs like $12 for Subway, just to put into perspective how bad it is there.
What? $12 just for the Subway? Like
Like a
just
sandwich.
just the sandwich.
Yeah.
What? What? Dude, the other day I went to Subway and for 2 meals with chips and drinks, it was $16. Like holy shit, that's like something I would see in my like college cafeteria.
I went
That's
to the
bad.
I went to the grocery store the other day, bought a bunch of stuff. It all cost together $12.
Well, I mean, maybe if we knew what you bought, that would that would mean something. But
It kind of
For
did.
I
all we
went
know,
to the store and bought some stuff. Doesn't really tell me anything.
for
That's
all we know, you
true,
could
but
have bought
still.
12 Hot Wheel cars for all we know. Hey, what? They're awesome.
Yeah, let's
Hot
see. I
Wheels
got some.
beat that.
I think I'm gonna not mention my grocery list on stream.
I assumed you weren't going to.
No,
You just bought a bunch of lizard food.
basically a whole bunch of feeder mice.
In a wheel. Oh wait, no, that's for hamsters. Never mind.
I'm not a hamster, not yet.
I have no idea why I thought that.
Filthy Heretic is a secret hamster conspiracy theory. Get on that, guys. Get on it.
I'm not saying I'm not a mole person, but I'm not a mole person.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So back to New York City. What's going on there, especially with like the absolute collapse of their restaurant industry or their inevitable collapse?
Yeah.
Well, it's absolutely hilarious. I think at this point, like the New York Times is just like daring people to just like, we think you're too stupid to be able to make this connection, so we're just gonna spell it out to you and see what happens. Which, I mean, if you're reading the New York Times, you probably are too stupid to make that connection. But nevertheless, I mean, they're basically proving that, yeah, it's all nonsense. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it besides that. I wonder how much that factored into the decision-making process of Amazon deciding not to build a new headquarters in New York City. You guys heard about that?
Yeah, you were mentioning it earlier, but I think I heard something about that a couple days ago.
Fucking shit.
Yeah, so I remember
Well,
making this.
when you're constantly putting zoning laws and more regulations, which just make it impossibly expensive to function in New York in a certain area, it's completely unsurprising that you start experiencing some capital flight.
Yeah, I remember where I used to live. There was like one major facility from an unspecified big company. I'm not gonna say which company because that'll basically dox me, or at least it would have doxed me if I didn't live there anymore. But it's a big company you would have definitely heard of. And when they left, they just up and left the town. Like thousands of people lost their jobs. The town is basically dead at this point.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I said what I just said. I just saw a fucking huge bug in my room, and I thought it was like some like Black Widow or something.
Mute yourself next time.
What the hell am I supposed to do when I see a sun bug? Like, do I just
Mute
think
yourself?
I'll turn off my? I won't worry about getting the fuck away first, but okay.
Yeah. So I remember making a video, I think over a year ago, about how Amazon is trying to build a second headquarters for some reason, but apparently their need for a second headquarters isn't great enough to use their own money, so instead they're trying to get bids from several city and state governments to have a facility built in their locality. And the amounts that these cities are promising are fairly outrageous, in terms of like hundreds of millions of dollars. Now these aren't direct subsidies, by the way. These are tax rebates. Now it goes without saying that taxation is theft, and all the money that Amazon is not paying in taxes is, well, generally a good thing. It does give them a significant competitive advantage, especially in regards to other companies in other cities. And even
Well,
inside that
you know,
city.
some of them actually are direct subsidies,
Well,
like the one in New Hampshire. Pretty sure.
yeah, you might want to look that up real quick. But it's interesting that they chose to finally settle down in New York City. And then what happened, allegedly, is that Alexandria Occasional Cortex, you know who, decided to whip up some of the community agitators into getting mass protests to get Amazon to not build in their city. I mean, her reasoning behind it is that Amazon abuses their workers, which, I mean, I'm pretty sure you've all seen the stories of people who work for Amazon being in terrible working conditions, being abused, being forced to work overtime and on holidays. But apparently that was just enough that they decided that no, they don't want an Amazon headquarters in their city. No.
Yeah.
In Virginia, New York, and Tennessee, they've been directly subsidized through spending bills.
Okay then.
So
Yeah, I mean, and apparently according to the article where this is from.
yeah, I get that.
Mhm.
It's very fucking frustrating how the media tries to conflate tax cuts with tax subsidies because they have two entirely different effects on the economy, and plus it sort of implies that the money belongs to the state in the first place.
Well, just let's listen to all arguments against tax cuts. They'll often make very totalitarian arguments that all tax cuts are costs to the government.
Oh well.
Well, I mean, I think we can figure out what their initial decision-making process was for going to New York City, because the argument where this is sourced from said that apparently this was a $3 billion deal. Which, I mean, that's a lot of money. Now, when Amazon up and left, there's also the mayor, Bill de Blasio, came out of the woodworks and decided to chide, criticize, and otherwise just belittle Amazon for not wanting to be abused in the city.
The regulations I created have driven Amazon out of New York, and now I'm gonna blame the free market for it somehow.
But what he said was that Bezos and Amazon, they're the 1%.
Fucking
They don't
course.
they don't care about New Yorkers. They're just the 1%. They're greedy capitalists who only care about profits.
Even though they need consumers to profit. Well, not if they weren't corporatists, that would be the case.
And that Bill de Blasio is an absolute imbecile and a hypocrite. I mean, being in the 1% is not that difficult if you're making six figures, which, let's be honest, de Blasio is. He is the 1%, dumbass.
Well, not only is he the 1%, but he's a politician
Which makes him actually even
in
worse.
New York City, no less.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
He actually wields political power, whereas a rich person doesn't.
now we're not fans of Amazon by any means. They're a corporatist entity that's largely subsidized by the state and continues to exist because of the state. But the response from progressives in regards to Amazon, chasing Amazon out of New York City, and then blaming Amazon for being chased out of New York City, I think it's absolutely hilarious.
Well, I mean, to give Bill de Blasio one thing, he has some pretty good political advisors because, yeah, he's one of the few partyarchy politicians who's basically hitting all the right notes, at least within the Democratic Party, to try and get that socialist base on his side. Like his political advisors have done their research. on what sort of stuff sells to those people. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying he's an interesting case.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, we're talking about capital flight. I mean, here I wouldn't even call it capital flight because they didn't even settle down in the first place. They just decided, like, yeah, you know what, we're not going to deal with this crap. Now, where Amazon goes and decides to settle down, I don't know. But the reason that cities and states are so keen on having Amazon is, one, because of the prestige that having an Amazon headquarters in their locality brings, and two, because it'll provide jobs, which under the Keynesian modernist economics will create more consumers, thus artificially increasing demand, thus stimulating their economy, blah 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 blah. The same kind of nonsense that causes countries to compete with each other over who gets to be bankrupted by the Olympic Committee for building a stadium that will never be used again.
Yeah.
Am I wrong here?
No.
I mean, I don't know what the effect of a new Amazon headquarters will be. I haven't seen any case studies of... I mean, it's not unique to Amazon. You have Apple also being bid over to have data centers built in certain places. I think there was like a $350 million mega deal to have a Apple data center built in Washington State, I think it was. I don't know what the effect of what effect that had on the economy, but... yeah. So I think we should move on to the next topic.
Sure. So which one? Is it the Activision one? Should I do that?
Yeah, do the Activision one.
So this
somebody, I was looking in the chat and somebody pointed to a video uploaded by the Radical Reviewer, somebody who has been on the back burner for a while here. But he apparently uploaded a video called "Capitalism Violates the NAP."
What?
I'm glad I waited because yeah, I haven't even seen this and I'm just gonna fucking trash the video.
Sounds like fun. Well, I mean, the problem is that, well, which definition of capitalism are you using? As you pointed out, capitalism is a political term.
Yeah, I'm going to mention that.
Mm-hmm.
A Radical Reviewer is one of those Marxists LARPing as an anarchist, so you know what he's talking about.
I'm going to assume that he doesn't even understand his own definition of capitalism, that he's going to contradict it several times, and that he doesn't understand the NAP either. Which, I mean, the NAP is so unbelievably simple to figure out that it's going to be a question of how did you pull this off? I haven't seen the video yet, but I think I've seen enough of them that I can kind of figure out what they're saying. This is why I made that video before about why Marxists are so boring. They say the same damn things over and over again. You already know what they're gonna do before they do it.
I mean, they don't even understand their own ideology. I mean, you can have an easier time convincing me of Marxism than Marxists themselves.
Actually, I could, because my understanding of the ideas is more coherent than theirs.
Yeah. So anyway, the story. So Activision, for this week, they reach highest, record high profits, but then they lay off 800 employees, from Blizzard or its other companies.
Clearly, and that's something which has been going across the entire gaming industry lately. It's clearly, a job bubble bursting. As a result of the fact that entire industry is basically built on a house of cards right now, because most of the major AAA publishers are heavily subsidized by the government, and it's just completely stagnating right now. There are no real, there are new titles, but they're all basically the same game right now, with a couple differences.
Well, this is why I encourage people to, when they say people say the gaming industry is dead, they're only looking at AAA. Whereas you look at indie developers, like the greatest games of all time that no one has ever heard of are being released right now.
I mean, even like right now, there are new games coming out. Like today, like Anthem just hit early access Origin.
And yeah, I've sort of been working on a side project. There's this old MMO which shut down a couple of years ago called Windslayer. Can't imagine someone watching would be familiar with it, because even when it was running, it wasn't that popular because it was terribly mismanaged. Well, I'm trying to bring it online again and put it on Steam, and I think at this I was going to just create a private server for it. But at this point, I'm actually looking to try and buy the rights to the game and all the files and everything that exist for it. But yeah, it's really the response from these pseudo-intellectual media reviewers like Jim Sterling and Yang Yi are, oh, well, this is a result of people are just being laid off to profit. These companies are making blatantly unprofitable decisions just for profit, which, yeah, I think even a retard could see the problem with that logic.
Has anyone asked the question why these 800 people were laid off?
No, but it has to do with businesses, so it can only be a result of rich people being assholes because they're rich people.
I mean, I just realized something. Do Marxists think that employment is charity?
They clearly don't. They clearly don't think of the labor market, as evidenced by how they describe someone being a wage laborer, like a class that you're born into.
I've actually tried to describe labor as a commodity, as something with supply and demand, and somehow I'm the bad guy because I've reduced something as noble and virtuous as labor to something that can be quantified by supply and demand.
Well, whether you like it or not, there are people who are willing to sell their labor, and there are people who are willing to buy it. So that is an industry.
Here's something that I was pointing out, like on Twitter, like the other day, and it's how. Hold on.
You don't remember what you said?
I'm sorry. No, I had to shut off my mic for a moment. Someone came in. I'm sorry about that, but I was pointing out online that for like over the past 10 years, like gamers back then have basically done a 180 on all their positions. Like the government shouldn't be getting involved in the industry, like the violent shooting or like the shootings in violent video games, or how kids can play M-rated games, or that we should spend less on.
Which is something that I've also been trying to point out, that yeah, I've noticed, like in 2012, I saw a bunch of these reviewing content creators trying to stop SOPA and PIPA, and there were a bunch of different movements like that, but now it's completely different. I mean, nowadays, if SOPA and PIPA were proposed, they'd probably support it. People like Jim Sterling would.
Yeah, I just find them all a bunch of hypocrites because, like, these people will change their positions just on the dime. Like, I mean,
yeah, I haven't really gone into that area of commentary, like the leafiest years, but I find all of them, like, I wouldn't argue that they're government shills. There's no evidence of that, but I think that they're all a bunch of absolutely corrupted, disgusting sellouts who will sell their beliefs down the river for whatever is popular at the moment, or whatever they think would be the most popular with their demographic, and they're not even remotely consistent. And now that this has got them siding with tyranny.
that's
Exactly what would kill the fucking industry, which they claim to care so much about. they're honestly almost as disgusting, maybe even more disgusting than status chills, because at least status chills, they're going into what they're doing, knowing that whatever they're doing, they're working in the interests of the state. But these people, they claim to care about games, and to some extent, they might care about games. And they're destroying everything just for their own fucking asses.
I
For
mean,
their
these
own
are the,
fucking bottom lines.
like, I mean, these people are, like, if you talk to them about intellectual property and how that's such a bad influence on games, like, it's probably the, like, reason why the industry sucks, because of how much power these companies have. I mean, like, a couple months ago, we talked about how Nintendo sued a family for $11 million for, like a couple selling ROMs. I mean, shit. I mean, like, no one will bat an eye about that, but then something like this happens, they just, like, lose their shit. And it really just makes you wonder.
It's because they're not thinking about their beliefs.
Yeah, they're just a bunch of gamers.
That's probably what they're trying to do. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to make the mistake of giving them the benefit of the doubt and just say that this is just an inevitable result of specialization. The kind of research and insight it takes to realize like what's really going on is something that maybe you and I are going to find because that's where we're kind of specialized at. Whereas someone who's following gaming news, gaming journalism, gaming in general, makes their living off of reviewing new games, they're probably what they're spending all their time doing. They're not really doing much of the thinking or taking their ideas to a logical conclusion. It's just a question of specialization. Unfortunately, their specialization is largely influenced by the fact that they've been probably been indoctrinated in government schools. So naturally, they'll default to, government fix this, government please fix that, government please enslave me to solve my problems.
Well, it's 9 now. Should we start wrapping up? I gotta go anyway.
Well, I was just going to mention on this, go ahead and look out for Windslayer development updates on that. Not really developing anything. I mean, now I'm not even certain what we're going to be doing here with that project, but yeah, within the next year or so, that there should like at least be some sort of development with that.
All right.
It was one of those games which was made in like the mid to late 2000s to compete with MapleStory, which was really popular at the time, but it had like just the smoothest controls. There's no other MMO on the market right now for competitive gaming, but Twitch didn't really exist at the time, and YouTube was a lot smaller. So that's the reason why there's only a handful of videos that you can find on YouTube if you search it up. But yeah, I plus on top of that, the publishers severely mishandled it. They did absolutely no advertising for it, and they very rarely updated it with new content. In fact, I don't think they did at all. So, I mean, I know what they did wrong, and if I can get the rights to it, then I'm definitely going to bring this thing back online. Anybody is interested in spreading the word, that would be greatly appreciated, because yeah, the community which the game had is small, but dedicated, and they've been sort of dormant for the last 3 to 4 years because yeah, the game's been offline since like 2012, and nobody's really done anything in terms of making a private server. But yeah, if you start spreading it around, I'm sure they'll sprout back up.
Yeah. Although I do think I can help in one aspect. Namely, that is, you want to get it through Steam, right?
Yeah.
Their process is through Steam Greenlight, which, once you get it greenlit, you can basically put as many games as you want on it on your account. So if you have the game hosted through my account, which I already have a game greenlit, you can bypass that process completely.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wish there were more things to talk about this stream.
But we were going to talk about what was it? The
Chicago shooting, but that story hasn't really developed yet.
I was thinking more along the lines of that that Venezuela roadblock.
Oh, sure, you can mention that.
Sure, we only have like 5 minutes left in the stream, but we can talk about that. So basically, what happened? I think it was like last week. We were going to talk about it on Tuesday, but we ended up not doing a stream that day. Was that there's videos going around the news about a week ago that Maduro had his military make these roadblocks along a major thoroughway. The problem is that the roadblock is very shoddily put together. It basically consists of 3 containers with a fence, like some temporary fence. I mean, that's going to stop traffic for sure, but it's kind of half-assed. The problem is that it's half-assed. I mean, you can see that just getting traffic around the roadblock wouldn't be terribly difficult. I mean, yeah, you have to cross a forest and a river, but could be done. You could also, fly over the roadblock or build a ramp over it if you're so dedicated. I mean, when I first encountered it, it didn't make any sense to me why Maduro would deliberately try to stop traffic from Colombia, unless it's to stop foreign aid. But then some more stories came out about, or trying to explain like what's really going on, and several points that are to be considered. First off, the United States has a long history of using foreign aid as a cover for trafficking weapons, drugs, and all sorts of other illicit goods for rebel groups. So U.S. might be bringing in foreign aid, and then smuggled in the crates are going to be weapons for the anti-Maduro groups. Secondly, that the Red Cross and the United Nations have actually warned the United States against bringing in foreign aid because they would see it as a huge publicity stunt.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone into great detail